Ollie Bearman's sickening 50G impact with the barriers during the Japanese Grand Prix exposed for the first time during a race a major flaw with F1's new 2026 cars. Certain F1 insiders have been warning since pre-season testing that this battery-dominated form of racing was an accident waiting to happen, and now that accident has happened. And F1 was lucky Bearman limped away from the crash scene with nothing more than a bruised knee. This was the sort of crash world champion Lando Norris warned us back in Melbourne would eventually happen under these new regulations because of unsafe and extreme speed differentials between cars when they run out of electrical energy. The nominal 50-50 split between electrical power and combustion engine leaves all the cars energy starved, meaning they simply don't have enough power to get around the circuit without suffering a dramatic drop in speed when that electrical energy eventually and inevitably runs out. This tends to happen at the end of long straights and through fast corners because teams have quickly worked out that's the most efficient way to minimise the impact of this energy starvation on your overall lap time. But these deployment strategies also vary depending on what power unit you use. They also vary between teams using identical power units, and they also get easily disrupted depending on the circumstances drivers find themselves in out on the track. As we saw with Charles Leclerc's Ferrari in sprint qualifying in China, a small extra lift off the throttle to correct a snap of oversteer can have dramatic consequences for energy deployment later around a lap. All of which is to say, the way energy harvesting and deployment works in F1 2026 is unpredictable, and that can have unintended consequences. One of these is dramatic closing speeds between cars when the one ahead runs out of energy much quicker than the one behind. Up until now, drivers have, by luck or by judgment, been able to avoid a serious accident, but in Japan, F1 2026 finally had its rude awakening. It was normal procedure in Japan for the cars to decelerate quite early on the approach to Spoon Curve, lifting and coasting into that section of track to help replenish their batteries. So Franco Colapinto's Alpine, running short of power as it made its way through the kink between the hairpin and spoon, wouldn't have been a total surprise to Bearman as he gave chase. But what clearly caught him out was the excessive rate at which that deceleration happened. It would appear the two cars had approximately a 50 km/h speed differential at the point at which they met. Haas team boss Io Komatsu confirmed Bearman was 20 km/h quicker than Colapinto through that section of track, even on what he called normal laps. When Bearman accessed additional electrical energy made available by regulation to attack the car in front, that difference increased by another 30 kph. It was this, combined with Colapinto positioning his car defensively in the middle of the track through that kink, that left Bearman with only a small gap to aim for to the Alpine's left, and not much time available to get through that gap. Perhaps in an understandable state of panic at the dramatic rate of closing, Bearman went too far left as he tried to avoid collecting the Alpine, lost control on the grass, and crashed heavily. Bearman was still doing over 300 km/h when his car left the circuit. After limping out of the cockpit, Bearman was taken to the circuit medical centre and x-rayed. Those scans revealed nothing more than a right knee contusion, which means bruising. But the FIA granted dispensation for Bearman to skip his usual post-race media duties. In a quote issued in the Haas team's post-race press release, Bearman called it a scary moment and said he felt he wasn't given enough space given the extreme closing speed. From the other side of the fence, Colapinto called it a strange accident and said he felt like a sitting duck because of the speed differential, comparing it to being on an out lap while the other car is on a fast lap in qualifying. Colapinto also referred to the fact the circuit curves at that point while the cars are on full throttle, but achieving wildly different speeds depending on their state of charge. He called this really sketchy and really dangerous. This is something drivers mentioned back in Australia, that running full throttle through fast kinks and with their wings backed off in straight line mode to reduce drag and increase top speed is orders of magnitude more dangerous when the leading car decelerates suddenly, because the cars are already under a degree of lateral load and therefore are much less easily able to take evasive action. Colapinto insisted he made no late move to defend position, and that's probably true when viewed through the lens of previous F1 eras, when closing speeds were not so dramatic. And to be fair, Komatsu also absolved Colapinto of any blame, saying he had driven consistently through that section of circuit. It's clearly very difficult for the drivers to make accurate judgments when the closing speeds can be so severe and so variable. Ferrari's Charles Leclerc feels with this new generation of energy-starved F1 cars, you need to race differently, and that any move or change of direction by the car ahead creates what he called some quite dangerous scenarios. For McLaren's Oscar Piastri, who said he himself had a near miss with Nico Hülkenberg's Audi during free practice in Japan, the danger in this Colapinto-Bearman incident was amplified by there being no obvious sign of so-called super clipping, which would have caused a red light to flash at the rear of the Alpine to alert the drivers behind that his engine was being used to recharge the battery. Colapinto's mistake, if he made one, and the stewards felt not after reviewing the incident, was placing his car in the sort of defensive, middle-of-the-road position through the kink that would have worked fine in pre-2026 versions of F1. But in this new Mario Kart version, and Max Verstappen even referred to mushroom mode when talking about this accident post-race, what feels like a totally safe, preemptive defensive move just doesn't happen in time to ensure the following car can react appropriately.
2026 means all new cars and engines in F1, and it also means a new partnership for F1's oldest and most successful team. Ferrari is joining forces with BingX for the 2026 season, making BingX the team's first ever crypto exchange partner. Ferrari represents over 75 years of F1 heritage, and BingX represents the cutting edge of crypto and AI technology, and both organisations value performance, precision and innovation. Founded in 2018, BingX is a leading crypto exchange and Web3 AI company with 40 million plus users, ranked top 5 in global derivatives and a pioneer in copy trading. BingX and Ferrari share the Drive Beyond vision. This isn't just a logo on the car either. Built on infrastructure, security and reliability, BingX operates at the level of the very best. Because for both, performance isn't just about results, it's about how far you can push a system while maintaining control and precision. It's about delivering under pressure when conditions are unpredictable and margins are razor thin.
Perhaps after this, F1 should start listening a bit more to what the likes of Fernando Alonso and Andrea Stella have been saying about these new regulations since the earliest days of Bahrain pre-season testing. Alonso calls it the Battery World Championship, and it's easy to dismiss that as cynical, rose-tinted criticism, but he's generally right in what he says. This overpowers the aerodynamics and creates conditions for cars to follow closely and overtake, but it also has unintended consequences, one of which is the excessive closing speeds that caused Bearman's accident. Before the Japanese Grand Prix, Alonso spoke about overtaking in F1 now being an evasive manoeuvre rather than something you properly strategise and execute. And he feels qualifying is even worse, calling it the most dangerous part because of even greater speed differentials between cars on fast laps versus cars on slow laps trying to recharge their batteries. He is already warning that street circuits with little or no runoff, such as Baku, Monaco and Singapore, will be orders of magnitude more dangerous than what we've seen so far. F1's key stakeholders plan to come together several times, according to the FIA, during the now extended April gap between Japan and the next race in Miami, to discuss what further rule tweaks are needed in the wake of these opening 3 race weekends. Carlos Sainz is a senior figure within the Grand Prix Drivers Association, and after learning of Bearman's accident, called on F1 and the FIA to make a big step in time for May's Miami Grand Prix. He echoed Alonso's view about the added danger of upcoming street circuits and said F1 should pay more attention to what the drivers are saying about the pitfalls of these new regulations. He feels GPDA warnings are being ignored by decision makers and that even worse crashes than Bearman's will happen at other tracks if something is not done to address these concerns. F1 deserves some credit for reducing the energy harvesting limit for Suzuka to try to improve the spectacle of qualifying and normalise the driving challenge to some extent after much backlash over the first 2 events. But it's also fair to say that simple measure was basically another sticking plaster that didn't really move the needle in terms of addressing the fundamental problem, which is these new power units simply don't work well enough for the cars and circuits they are providing propulsion for. Sainz said he was surprised when the decision makers decided to tweak qualifying but leave the racing alone, because it's exciting. To his mind, and plenty of other drivers will feel this way even if they won't say it publicly, there is no form of single-seater racing with closing speeds this extreme, and it's simply not safe. Sainz also speaks from experience. He endured a 46G crash of his own during final practice for the 2015 Russian Grand Prix. Sacrificing driver safety for TV entertainment would go against the grain of basically everything the FIA has been doing in F1 since 1994. The 2026 version of F1 is basically one giant compromise built around the desire to make battery power a bedrock of how F1 cars are propelled. But when it comes to the safety of its participants, there can surely be no room for compromise.